Hey there, Mr. Redder here. Welcome back to another episode of Reddit Podcast Stories. Our first story we'll be reading today. You need to grade my test accurately. It's for a scholarship. After that, am I the jerk for moving out when my parents asked me to pay rent? And after that, you have to use your vacation days. Now for every thumbs up this video gets, one Karen does not get a scholarship. Your mom goes to college? I can't be the only one still quoting Napoleon Dynamite in 2023. So please smash that like button and subscribe and turn on notifications for new stories from Reddit every single day. You need to grade my test accurately. It's for a scholarship. I really try to be a positive and supportive, caring college instructor. My clientele are mostly college-age students enrolled in what is basically a pre-algebra course my community college likes to call college math. I have the occasional young whiz kid who enrolls in my course to be super advanced. But for the most part, young adults in their 20s and 30s are who I teach, and solving systems of equations by substitution is currently what I teach them. I have many students who struggle and require additional tutoring, and I'm always happy to oblige. There's this one student who I wish would show up to our makeshift tutoring group, but who never does. Let's call her Mara. Mara seriously acts like we're back in high school, interrupting my demonstrations. Hey, OP, my dad says this isn't the way to solve it. Mr. OP, why don't you teach at ASU? Our partnering major university we transfer students to. What did you do wrong that you're teaching at this place? The list goes on and on. We have an exam that about half the class got a 90 or better on, followed by most of the rest getting B's and C's, etc. I know that this community college, despite its cheap cost, still has many students on full scholarships for one thing or another, whether it be sports, personal hardships, activities, etc. That being said, if I notice a student tank the test, I may just grade the thing on a curve to allow them to get the most points possible. This is what I chose to do for Mara, and she wound up with an 18 out of 25 on her exam. I typed in the score and took a glance at her paper afterward and realized that she actually missed yet another question, a major one that would have brought her grade super low. I decided to look the other way, part laziness, part being nice. Let's not say how much each part is worth, but they're not equal. So it's time to return the test that I already had graded in the system when Mara starts up with her questions again. They are literally too tiresome to include. I will say her final piece, however. Mr. OP, I noticed that you gave me an 18 out of 25 on my last test. Could I take a look at the test and see what I got wrong? I definitely didn't miss that much. I tried to use inflection to let her know that she should probably just be happy with the 18 by saying, yeah, I think I'd be happy with the 18 there, kiddo. Then she suddenly dropped a petty pebble on top of a snowy hill. She continues, this time standing, walking towards me and pointing her Cruella de Vil finger at me, saying, no, you can't just put whatever you want for my grade. 18 out of 25 is not even possible. I need to keep my GPA high because of all my scholarships. You need to grade my test accurately. Enter pettylicious compliance. I knew good and well that she did not deserve, by any stretch of the imagination, anywhere near the 72 that 18 out of 25 got her. She didn't master 72% of the content. She didn't get 72% of the questions correct. I'll be honest and say that when I grade dozens of exams, I tend to look at the most important questions on each test and ensure these are 100% accurate. I always pepper in some spirally thinking type questions, you know, stuff with rigor, but I don't grade against it. If I ever make an error in grading, it 150% of the time favors the student. I took her papers out of my case, file through the exams, and find her particular one, and look at it quizzically. Then I look back at her while my head is still positioned towards the paper. I'm trying so hard to give her an out, but she wouldn't budge. So I say, you know what? You're right. I did make an error. Oh, crud. More than one. I then, behind my desk where the students couldn't see what I was looking at, graded her paper right then and there. By this time, I had memorized the answers to the exam without even needing to pull out the key, but I did so to show her that I was grading it thoroughly, you know, accurately. She wound up with a 14 out of 25. I handed it back to her right then and there and let her know that I had changed the grade accordingly in her gradebook, that the 14 that she had just got turned her high C to a solid D. She looked through the exam, scouring through it like a madman. I also made sure I took a picture of the test before handing it back so she couldn't pull the, see, I made it negative, it's right, sort of thing. She's done that in the past. She quickly whipped out her phone to see how much this impacted her grade overall. She was livid without a direction to hurtle it towards. I could see that this act of petty malicious compliance on my part was a little too far. I actually felt bad for Mara. As she looked up at me, I could see her eyes well up a bit. It was that too quiet right before something bad was about to happen. My spidey senses were tingling. Before she started to take her clenched arms, that she looked like she was trying to remove the top of the desk from its connected chair and turn them on me, I offered a solution. Look, Mara, remember, you can do the corrections on the exam for a fourth of the credit, okay? That will get you almost all of the points that you were gifted in the first place. What do you say? She sheepishly agreed, wound up with a 17.5 out of 25, and has yet to give me a hard time since. But I'm pretty sure my semester survey will suffer greatly. Am I the jerk for moving out when my parents asked me to pay rent? I, 23, am the oldest of 5 siblings, and I'm a full-time student. I also have a part-time job in my field, but when I complete my after degree, my employer will take me on full-time. I make enough from part-time to pay for school and put money aside. My siblings range from 20 to 10. Both of our parents work full-time. I've taken on a lot of the responsibilities for keeping everything running around the house. I do the grocery shopping, the laundry, as well as making supper and doing meal prep so that everyone has lunches ready to take every day. I also get all of my siblings to do their part with regards to household chores. For example, my youngest brother is responsible for feeding and walking the dogs, so I make sure that there is dog food in the storage and bags on the leash. My dad works very long hours, and my mom works 9 to 5 at a hard job. Over Christmas, I had a chance to buy a PS5 for myself, so I did. The rest of my family is still using a shared PS4. I keep mine in my room, and I do not share it. My parents started fielding complaints from my oldest brother about how I made so much money and I don't share the things I buy for myself. Totally true. So they had a talk with me where they brought this up. I pointed out how much of the household work I did, and they said it wasn't fair that I was earning so much money without contributing. They told me how much they expected from me. I went to my room and I did the math. If I gave them what they wanted, I would have about $800 a month left over. If I dropped a couple of classes next semester, I could go to almost full-time hours with my employer, and it would only be 1 more year until I graduated with my second degree. But I could afford my own place, and I would have way more free time and disposable income. I packed up and moved out. Everything I owned fit in my car. I stayed at an Airbnb for 2 weeks until I could get everything sorted with an apartment, school, and work. It was great. I'm not going to lie, I may have gone a little overboard on Tinder. I couldn't have anyone over when I lived with my parents. I just moved into my own apartment. I'm staying part-time until I finish the semester. I'll work full-time over the summer and go to a lighter class load and higher work hours in the fall. My oldest brother has been tasked by my parents to do everything I used to do. His chores have been split up with the other 3. They're all upset with me for moving out. My parents are upset that I left them in the lurch. My siblings are mad that they all have more chores. My oldest brother is especially salty because he has no free time to see his girlfriend and she isn't allowed in the house when my parents aren't home. I'm enjoying my free time. I bought myself a plant from IKEA. I feel bad for doing them all over, but it didn't make sense for me to do all of that work and pay rent on top. Edit. All the chores were split fairly. I wasn't doing any more than anyone else. I thought it was fair until I was asked to put in money as well. Not the jerk. If you left them in the lurch, that should be a flashing sign of how much you were contributing. I was ready to call you the jerk, but you're carrying the entire mental load of the household. You shouldn't be expected to share the money you earn. I bet your oldest brother is regretting making such a fuss about you buying yourself a PS5 with your own money. He started all of this. I know that all parents are different and have different plans on how they can or want to support their kids. Some start rent right at 18 or high school graduation. Some pay for all expenses through college. Many of us are somewhere in between. It doesn't sound like your parents told you in advance that rent would start at a certain age, which I think is unfair. It sounds more like they just wanted to confiscate part of your income so your siblings wouldn't be as jealous. When they introduced the idea of rent, I would have introduced the concept of decreased chores. Someone renting a room would traditionally not have assigned chores and childcare. They would just tidy up after themselves. Parents often initiate conversations about rent to inspire young adults or older offspring to move out. Even when that wasn't the parents' intent, the rent talk often inspires the offspring to do a cost and benefit analysis and decide to move out. That's what happened here. it certainly doesn't make you a jerk. Not the jerk. Your parents aren't jerks for bringing up the subject, but they definitely are for trying to guilt trip you after you made the best choice for you to move out. Good for you. Just desserts. For many years, I worked at a Pizza Hut. I have a million stories, and while many are malicious, only a few contain much compliance. At this time, I was a dish dude / phone answer / whatever needed to be done. I was persistently amused by how quickly even the most trivial amount of power could go to people's heads. One waitress, who I'll call Donna, and then never use that name again in this whole story, was given some sort of title, like Grand Overlord of Waitstaff or something, which conferred upon her the power to do the same job as before, but with more work. She wasn't actual management, not that I would have cared much if she was. I showed up early every day, as was my habit, and one evening I was somewhere in the back wandering about, 20 minutes before my shift. The phones were ringing and being ignored by just about everyone as usual, so the team lead of waitstaff ordered me to answer it. If she had asked, I would have done it, as I had done 1,000 times before, but this was a decree from on high. I informed her that my shift didn't start for a while yet, but this detail failed to impress. I said I would have to clock in before I could use the order-taking computerizing thingy, and my manager would have to approve me doing that. They were oddly strict about that for a restaurant. She said she was a manager and to just do it, but I didn't. So she swiped her card into the magic order screen and yelled politely to just take the phone order. Under her card, her name, off the clock. Okay. Humbled by my public defeat, I meekly picked up the phone and proceeded to thank the caller for choosing, etc., and took the order. As I did so, I added 7 Bigfoot pizzas with extra whatever and a dozen bottles of beer for delivery and a couple of dessert pizzas. I told them their total before all of the added nonsense, and the call ended. The thing is, we had stopped selling Bigfoot pizzas a few years before. We hadn't carried dessert pizzas since the mid-15th century, but they were still in the system, and we did not deliver beer, as doing so could be illegal. The cooks were confused, the actual managers were confused, and questions were being asked. Anyhow, I went outside for a smoke. The Royal Duchess of Waitressing came storming out the back door a bit later and said a bunch of words or something, then went back in. As I learned later, after clocking in, she had to get the help of an actual manager to delete all of that stuff and change the total, which messes up their numbers or something. I don't really know why, but they sure didn't like deleting things. And she had to tell them that she had me use her swipey name thing to take the order because I was off the clock, and they really did not care for that at all. Right in front of the assistant manager, she threatened to write me up, which she did not have the authority to do. No customers were harmed in the making of this compliance, since they got the actual stuff they ordered, and there was no wastage since no one could make a Bigfoot or dessert pizza if they had wanted to. Just a bit of extra paperwork and a very annoyed wait queen. Am I the jerk for sleeping the whole evening away when my girlfriend's family came to visit? I think the title is self-explanatory. My girlfriend's family are quite upset with me, but let me give you a bit of background. I, 25 female, am currently a resident. My specialty is a particularly demanding one. I have 24-hour shifts every other day, and I get to go on 72-hour shifts at the hospital with only a few hours of sleep 4 times a month. I've been dating my girlfriend, who's 23, for 2 years. Her parents and brother, who's 29, live in a different city. They were going to come visit us for a few days. My girlfriend had told me beforehand. She obviously knows my schedule. I offered to help her before her parents got here. I only managed to get a few items, gifts, etc. Later, she told me to carry on with my routine and said that she'd handle the hosting duties. I had one of those 72-hour nightmare shifts. We had countless admissions and only got to sleep very occasionally. It's safe to say I was almost a zombie by the time I got home. After I got home, I took a shower and told my girlfriend I was going to sleep for a bit. I set an alarm to get up and help my girlfriend in the kitchen, watch a movie or something. I slept through the whole day and got up around 10 p.m. When I went downstairs, I saw my girlfriend's parents and her brother. I had completely forgotten about my girlfriend's family coming over later that day. They had a very unimpressed look. My girlfriend's mother told me it was extremely disrespectful of me to not have been there to welcome them the first time that they were coming over to visit. I got similar comments from all of them. My girlfriend said she purposely didn't wake me up because I was going to go back to the hospital in a few hours and I needed my sleep. Her family didn't change their minds. Her brother later told me, privately, that I was neglecting my girlfriend and being selfish in this relationship. He said his sister deserved much better than someone who wouldn't even acknowledge her family. I feel horribly about all this. I asked a few friends, but they're all terrible when it comes to these kinds of advice. I honestly don't know. Am I the jerk? Edit. I was allowed to leave the hospital around 2 p.m., got home around 3 p.m., took a shower, and went to sleep at 3:30. I set an alarm for 6 p.m., but I slept through it. They arrived at about 5. Not the jerk. It's not like you were out partying. You're a medical resident. You'd have to live under a really heavy rock to not know they get the worst shifts and any downtime is taken over by exhaustion. Your girlfriend wasn't offended and completely understood. Let her deal with her judgmental family. You just try to survive residency. Not the jerk. I can't believe the family doesn't understand your schedule. If you don't get enough sleep, your patients could suffer from bad health care. The only opinion that counts is your girlfriend's. If she's cool with it, don't worry about her family. Not the jerk. Almost went with no jerks here. I mean, it is kind of expected to be present when your partner's family is visiting, so I get that they were confused and a little upset. But it was an honest mistake on your side, and your girlfriend chose to not wake you up, and also told her family why you were absent. They should have let this go after your girlfriend explained the situation. Entitled mother tried to steal my tablet, so I went from 0 to 100 to make her back off. I, 33, male, am an ELA teacher based in China for the last 3.5 years. First, a little bit of information before I get to the story. There is a bit of a pay gap between foreign and Chinese teachers. It's also a well-known fact that only the most opportunistic ones like to capitalize on it from time to time, if you're not careful. It can be anything from charging more at stands to, on the rarest of occasions, guilting them into complying. Trust me, it's happened, and those select few are not apologetic about it. Now, on to the story. It was Chinese New Year, and I was on the train to Chongqing to visit a friend. I don't like flying, and I really like trains. I had my Samsung tablet with me, and I was watching Final Fantasy VII with my Bluetooth. Suddenly, I felt something nudging against me. I looked to see a kid, maybe in elementary, trying to look at the movie. So I turned off my Bluetooth and I turned the tablet to him so that he can watch it. Sounds weird, but being a teacher here, you get used to it. Anyway, he was really immersed and, though I couldn't understand him, I could tell that he was really enjoying it a lot. He was trying to talk to me, but his English wasn't so good and my Chinese was worse. So he opted for, "I like this, so cool, me too," and things like that. Very basic English. He was a sweet kid and he got to watch the whole thing before our stop. He even said, "Chongqing," and I said, "Me too." He waved goodbye and ran back to his mom, and I began to pack my things so I could get off. Then it happened. A woman approached me with the kid and, in perfect English, demanded my tablet. She literally said, "Give me your tablet." I thought I was in the Twilight Zone and wanted to ensure that I had heard her correctly. "Excuse me?" "Give me your tablet. I want my son to have it." I refused, a simple no, and she said those magic words that I'd begun hating to hear. "But you're a foreigner. You can just buy another one." Now, a couple of things. One, I don't know if the kid really wanted my tablet or not, and frankly, I didn't care. Two, I come from a family that has taught me to never let anyone make you feel less than others. If someone tries to take my dignity, it's not going to end well for that person. And no, I don't actually have to fight to get my point across. Fair warning, I'm paraphrasing the confrontation because it lasted a lot longer than I cared for. I said, "No, I can't. I had to save to buy this. You can do the same." "No, you can give us yours and stop being selfish." Again, I countered. "Or you can stop being an entitled jerk and buy your own." It was my first time seeing a shocked Pikachu face, and to rub salt in the wound, I added, "Shoo, shoo." She did go away, only to come back with the police. That I should have seen coming, but I didn't because I was focused on getting off the train. Lucky for me, he also spoke English with great fluently. He was also really polite and obviously not in the mood for any of it. "Sir, this woman says you stole her tablet." I saw the woman behind him with a triumphant smirk while speaking Chinese. I let out a sigh. I had already wasted enough time on this nonsense, so I did what I always did when I wanted to get my point across in the quickest way possible. I turned cold. In fact, my students refer to it as me turning into being Laoshi, ice teacher. I looked at the police officer and said, "I'll make a deal with you. I'm going to use my fingerprint to unlock this tablet. If it doesn't work, she can have it. If it does work, I get my revenge on her." That woman's Pikachu face came back so fast that the officer even had a shocked look. He asked me if I was serious, and I said, "Definitely." I guess the woman saw my face and tried to backpedal, but I wasn't going to let her go until I made my point. When she tried to leave, I said, "Where are you going? I thought you said this was yours." The woman looked to the police for help, but as I said, he was not in the mood and just spoke as she was. She said something in Chinese to the man, only for the man to give a short reply. I guess he wasn't going to entertain this after all. "How dare you! You had the nerve to try to take something that's mine because I'm a foreigner. You're disgusting. You should be ashamed of yourself." The woman had a mixture of fear, shock, and anger on her face when I finally asked, "Is this your tablet?" When the woman said no, I leaned my head in towards her and barked, "What was that?" She finally said that the tablet was mine before taking her kid and leaving. The kid did wave goodbye to me despite his mother's objections, and I smiled and waved back. The officer asked me if I was serious about what I wanted to do, and I told him the truth. I would never have done something like that. He laughed and wished me a happy Chinese New Year. I told my friend about this, and we had a good laugh. My mom stole my college fund. Now I'm suing her. Backstory. My parents got divorced when I was around 11. Around the same time, my mom was in a car accident and had won a fairly large settlement on top of my grandpa passing in the middle of it, so she was left with a fairly large chunk of money. During their divorce, my mom constantly kept me and my siblings in the loop of everything and made my dad look like he was the villain in the situation, despite my mom's cheating being the reason for their separation. And when you're young, you want to believe your parents have your best interests at heart. My dad paid over $300 weekly in child support for my siblings and I, and when I decided at 20 I wanted to move in with my dad, she stopped talking to me for a while since she would fully lose all child support. Part of the divorce agreement was that my dad would not ask for any of the money from the settlement as long as $40,000 of it went into a college fund for me, since at the time my siblings had no interest in pursuing college. Everything was arranged, the divorce papers were signed, and my mom gloated about how much money I would have for school. And on top of that, my siblings and I had $10,000 each as an inheritance from my grandfather's will for us to use when we turned 18. A few years later, she had fully renovated my grandfather's house that we moved into. We had a new car, went on a 7-night Disney cruise, followed by a stay at a deluxe Disney hotel. We were fairly happy, and I was a sophomore in high school, excited to start looking at colleges, when my mom informed me that she spent my entire college fund and inheritance on everything above. I was floored. The first thing I had done was tell my dad, who became so angry he immediately contacted his own lawyer and took my mom back to court to figure out a way to make that money back. At this point, we lived paycheck to paycheck and heavily relied on the child support to afford a living. So she was served the court papers and they went in front of a judge, where my mom was given a slap on the wrist since it was determined she didn't make enough money to pay back the $40,000 college fund. Throughout my entire childhood, my mom was mistreating towards me and my siblings. She manipulated us to be at each other's throats constantly, and she was very narcissistic. She continued to get worse during my childhood, and my anxiety and depression was crippling. It took moving to a different state to realize how harmful she was in my childhood and to see clearly how much she messed me up, and I went no contact almost a year ago. My dad is about to retire and made it known to me that according to his divorce agreement, my mom gets a good chunk of his pension, which got my gears turning. Would I be able to take my mom to court over the college fund again, but this time to try to use his pension to replenish my funds? Even if that means I'm doing her out of $1,000 plus a month for my dad's work. Not the jerk, but I don't know if this will work. Technically speaking, since she violated the divorce agreement, things should be brought to court to be rediscussed. Since she will now be getting $1,000 extra per month, she will have the money to pay back the $40,000 college fund, but I don't know how these things work. Not the jerk. Parents that spend money that isn't theirs like your mother did disgusts me. It would have been different if you or one of your siblings had a medical emergency that required funds, but that's not the case here. HOA Karen got my car towed. Worst mistake she ever made. Years ago, I owned a big Mercedes. It was an 83 300 SD. It had upwards of 860,000 miles on it. I bought it from my father for $1, but actually only gave him 99 pennies a couple years after he bought it from his uncle. It was a massive car that was fun to drive. Like old turbo diesels often do, the turbo went out. The car still ran just fine, but it was more than sluggish going up hills. Living in the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains made this an issue. The cost to repair was like $800. I needed about 6 weeks to be able to afford the repair. No big deal. I'll just park it on the condo parking pad about 50 yards from my condo, save up the money, then get it fixed. Then one day I come home and my car is gone. I'm not distraught, but incredibly upset. I call the police and a nice officer comes to take a report about my stolen car. A week or so goes by and I receive a phone call. Alas, my car has not been stolen, it has been towed. I make my way up to the tow yard and ask the dude in the building, what the heck? And he proceeds to tell me that an HOA member named Diane called and said it was improperly parked, against their rules, and had it towed according to their policies and signage. I paid him $550, which was the cost of the storage for over a week and the hookup charge, then drive my car back home. In the process of towing my car, the winch cable put a dent in my front bumper because the car was so long and heavy. I get home to call the landlord and ask about the CC&Rs. She sends them to me and there is nothing in there about the length of parking, only abandoned vehicles. The car was operable and had a valid tag and 4 tires full of air. It was obviously not abandoned. At this point, I began my research. I had the CC&Rs already and knew I was good there. Georgia law states that parking enforcement signs must be 4 feet above grade, which this neighborhood signs were 3 feet. I found the names of each board member and the property management company. Diane was not listed as a board member. Interesting. I sued. I sued everyone. I sued the driver of the tow truck and the tow company for damaging my vehicle. I sued each and every HOA board member individually for towing my car improperly. I sued my landlord, just in case she needed to be named as well. I sued the property management company since they work for the HOA. I filed a subpoena for any and all records related to towing my car from the tow company. Lucky for me, they actually recorded their phone calls, and I had that phone call recording. I subpoenaed HOA board members for the past 10 years, and Diane was never a board member in the minutes. Finally, I sued Diane. I sued her for the cost of recovering my vehicle. Georgia has a provision in state law that allows for treble damages when a defendant acts with willful misconduct or fraud. I spent roughly 6 hours researching my case and decided to pay myself $100 an hour, which I felt was fair, as an attorney would have charged at least twice that. I amended my complaint to ask for treble damages against Diane. Court day. Before the case is heard, the judge dismisses the case against my landlord, as she had nothing to do with this. He dismisses the case against the tow truck driver, as he was acting as an agent of the company already named. He also dismisses the case against each board member, as they had no part in this at all. I was prepared for and expected these dismissals. It's better to sue everyone remotely involved and have their cases dismissed than to lose because you didn't name the right person. It's my time to shine, and I'm ready. I enter into evidence the state code that regulates signage, then submit my evidence that the signage did not follow the state law. This is my case against the property management company. The judge asks the property management company to respond, and they admit fault. I move for a directed verdict against the property manager for the cost of the hookup. Judge awards me $75 for the tow hookup fee and my $50 court filing fee from the property management company. Next, I enter into evidence the damage to my bumper. I also submit estimates from a Mercedes dealership to repair the bumper. Tow company says, "Yeah, that's our bad. We'll pay it." I'm then awarded $1,200 from them. Next is my case against Diane. I call the guy in the shack at the tow yard who testifies that I drove my car home that day. I enter into evidence the phone call she made to have my car towed, and he testifies to its authenticity. Diane has no clue what's happening, so she doesn't cross-examine him. I call the property manager, who is still in the courtroom, to testify that Diane is not and has never been a board member. She's still befuddled. I submit into evidence my current registration, showing the tag is valid, and a picture of my car in the courthouse parking lot, showing I drove it there that day. I sum up by telling the judge that Diane acted with willful misconduct by calling to have my car towed when it didn't violate any of the CCNRs. Then I argue that she acted fraudulently by claiming to have authority as a board member to have it towed. I explain that by acting with willful misconduct and fraud, I am entitled to treble damages. I'm not exactly sure what her response was because I was having trouble hearing since I was so excited at having just owned Diane in open court. The judge awarded me $1,075 from Diane, $475 for the money I paid for the storage to the tow yard, plus the $600 in work I put in. Then he hit her with the treble damages. Now she owes me $3,225. 30 days later, my excitement has subsided, but she hasn't paid. I file notice with the court. 30 days after that, still no money. I go to the marshal's office with my judgment, and they tell me to find her bank accounts and come back. 30 days later, I go back to court and file and receive a garnishment order. Paid a private investigator $150 and we find her bank account. Back to the marshal's office, and we go to Bank of America and clean out her checking and savings accounts. I'm short like $1,500 though. Went back to Bank of America a couple months later and she had closed her account. Paid the same private investigator again and found an account at SunTrust. Then went into that bank and took $1,250. I left $250 on my judgment out of spite. I used that $250 judgment against Diane to file a lien against her home. I left it there to mess with her, so she would always remember me when she tried to refinance or sell her home. I never did collect that $250, and the lien was released after 10 years. That was fine with me. I felt she had been punished enough. That jerk. I did wind up fixing the car though. Drove great after that.
Support our channel by joining as a member today, and we'll give you a shout out in our next video.
Or come watch this video next. You won't believe what Karen does in that one.